Hello and welcome once again to our series of the Ultimate March Madness Tournament. My name is Natty Cash. Thank you for coming to watch. This is the 11th video in our series. If you haven't seen the previous ones, please go see in the description. There's a link to part 1, and you can watch the whole series up to this point. But if you have been tuning in each time I post a video, we'll take a look at where we're at and what our goal is for this video and what region we're going to do next. So in our last video, we had the Texas Longhorns beat out the Yukon Huskies to make it into the Sweet 16. Our next region that we're going to discuss and solve and determine who's going to be the winner out of that region will be the California region, being hosted in Sacramento. So let's take a look at that bracket in its entirety. All right, as we take a look at the California region, our number 1 seed that is in this region is the Baylor Bears, coming out of the Big 12, 24-11 record, third in the Big 12. They unfortunately lost out to Iowa State in the conference tournament. Let's see what they can do now, sitting in a number 1 seed position. They are awaiting their matchup between either the Southern Utah Thunderbirds, coming out of the WAC conference with a 10-21 record, and the Mount St. Mary's Mountaineers, coming out of the Mid-Atlantic region, 8th in their region. Let's see what these two teams can do, sitting in that 16th playoff position. As we move further down, we are going to have the Eastern Washington Eagles, coming out of the Big Sky region, a 21-11 record, a respectable record, got them to first in their league. Unfortunately, they lost out early in their conference tournament to Sacramento State. They're up against the number 8 seed, the Arkansas Razorbacks, a 16-17 team coming out of the SEC, only good for 12th in that league. So we'll kind of see a top team in a smaller conference versus a lower team in a big conference. This could be a good matchup. Next, we have our number 5 position is going to be North Texas, the Mean Green, with a 19-15 record, coming out of the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. They are only 7th in that league, lost out to Florida Atlantic in the conference tournament, but they will have a nice 5th seed to work from. Their matchup is yet to be determined, as the number 12 seed will be between the Dartmouth Big Green and the Illinois State Redbirds. The Big Green, coming from the Ivy League, did not do well this last season. 6-21 record, bottom of the Ivy League. Let's see what they can do against the Redbirds, coming out of the Missouri Valley Conference. 15-17 record, good enough for 7th in that conference. Two teams that could turn their fortunes around in this tournament. Then we have the 13 seed, another play-in game, which will be between the Delaware State Hornets, coming out of the MEAC Conference. 15-17 record, good enough for 6th in the league, but they had a very good run, getting all the way to their conference finals and just losing out to Howard in the very end. They're up against the Texas State Bobcats. 17-18 record, coming out of the Sun Belt, 11th in their league, but they also had a good run, only losing out to James Madison after getting 3 consecutive wins in their conference tournament. So 2 teams that had good conference play. Let's see if they can continue that. They will have to face, whoever wins will have to face the Ohio State Buckeyes. 22-14 record, good enough for 10th in the Big Ten. We'll see with them sitting in the 4 spot if they can make a run in this tournament. As we take a look at the bottom half of this region, we get to our number 2 seed, which is the Gonzaga Bulldogs, a 27-8 record, good enough for 2nd in the West Coast Conference. They lost out to St. Mary's in the conference finals. We'll see if the Bulldogs, who have had good tournament success in real life, if they can have success here in this type of tournament. They are up against the 15 seed, which would then be the Binghamton Bearcats and the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. The Bearcats, out of the America East Conference, had a 15-15 record, good enough for 5th in their league. And the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, again, 16-16 record, so both at 500 records. Coming out of the Sun Belt is Southern Miss, going 6th in their league. So could be a tight matchup between those two. Then we have, on our number 7 seed, we have the Panthers from High Point. A 27-9 record coming out of the Big South was very good. Good for 1st in their league. Unfortunately, they had lost out in overtime to Longwood in their conference tournament. So they might have something to prove here now sitting in that 7th seed. They will start off playing against the Paladins from Furman University. 17-16 record coming out of the Southern Conference, good enough for 5th in their league. So we'll see who can come out of those two purple teams in that part of the bracket. As we venture further down, we have the Terrapins of the University of Maryland. 16-17 record out of the Big Ten, good enough for 12th in that league. Let's see if they can take some of their big conference success and translate it into this tournament. They will await their opponent, which will be between the Black Knights from Army and the Lumberjacks from Stephen F. Austin. The Black Knights from Army are from the Patriot League, a 10-22 record, good enough for 8th in the Patriot League. And the Lumberjacks from the WAC Conference, 18-15 record, good enough for 6th in their league. So we'll see if they can make some noise moving forward, vying for that 11 seed position. Our 14th seed is our last playing game in this region, which will be between the Campbell Fighting Camels and the Iona Gales. The Campbell Fighting Camels is 14-18 record out of the Coastal Athletic Region, 9th in their league. Let's see what they can do up against the Gales out of the Mid-Atlantic Conference, 16-17 record, good enough for 7th in their league. Whoever wins this matchup, however, does have to face the number 3 seed, which is the Drake Bulldogs. A very solid record of 28-7. Coming out of the Missouri Valley Conference. They were 2nd in their league going into the conference tournament, but went all the way, beating Indiana State to become conference champions. So let's see what Drake can do now that they've become conference champions. Can they become regional champions in this type of format? So this is the entire bracket from top to bottom. If you'd like, please put your predictions down in the comments below, and we are going to get started with all the play-in rounds first and find out who is going to be our representative out of this California region. We will start off with the Southern Utah Thunderbirds and the Mountaineers coming from Mount St. Mary's. And as you can see here, the Thunderbirds get the close victory in the end. Unfortunately, I don't have any progress lines to show you the progression of the game, but here we have the Thunderbirds moving on to the next round. So with the Thunderbirds moving on, they will await the Baylor Bears in their next matchup. As we move forward, we are going to have the Dartmouth the Dartmouth Big Green up against the Redbirds from Illinois State. And it is the Redbirds with the victory here. They took a lead early on and extended that pretty significantly. Even though they had an offensive drought as they led into halftime, they continued to score offensively and enough to get the 65-55 victory. So we see Illinois State moving on, and they'll have to face the Mean Green of North Texas in their next matchup. Next up, we have the Hornets of Delaware State up against the Texas State Bobcats to fill in that 13th seed position. And it is Delaware State that get the victory here. They take the lead early, and even though they only had about maybe a 6-point lead at halftime, they continue to push forward on the way to getting a comfortable 20-point victory in the end. And they are moving on. So as you can see, Delaware State have moved forward. They will have to play Ohio State in their next matchup. As we move to the bottom of the bracket, we are going to have the Binghamton Bearcats up against the Golden Eagles coming from Southern Mississippi. And we have Southern Miss getting the win here. Binghamton did get a lead in the first half, but by halftime, looks like the Golden Eagles were up by looks close to 9, and they kind of maintained that throughout. They both, back and forth scoring, but could never really close into that lead, and Southern Miss get the victory. And we see Southern Miss move forward to then play the Gonzaga Bulldogs in the next their next game. As we continue down, we will have the Black Knights from Army up against the Lumberjacks from Stephen F. Austin. And we do see the Lumberjacks of SFA make their way to a victory here. They took the lead early, although Army did have a slight lead at some point, but by halftime there is a significant lead, and they continue that on comfortably to get their first win of the tournament. And we see Stephen F. Austin moving on. They'll have to play Maryland in their next round. Lastly, we have the Fighting Camels of Campbell up against the Iona Gales to fill in that last play-in spot. And we have a very close game between both of these. Looks like Campbell was winning most of the way and even had upwards of a 14-point lead around halftime. But Iona pushed forward, got the lead, and pushed and finished off with a 2-point victory in the end. Wow, great job for Iona to come back after such a deficit. And so here's the entire bracket now with all the playing games finished and the 16 teams that are going to represent the California region. Now, we're going to go from the top. We're going to have the Baylor Bears up against the Southern Utah Thunderbirds. And we have the Baylor Bears getting the win here. But it was really interesting to see, even though the Bears had a reasonable 10-point lead at halftime, Southern Utah got it to the point where it was tied up or even just leading by 1. But it was Baylor. They were able to push further some more and get the victory in the end. And with Baylor moving on, they will have to await their opponent, which will be either the Eastern Washington Eagles or the Arkansas Razorbacks. And we do have the Razorbacks getting the victory here. It's very close in the first half, a few lead changes, but Arkansas only had about a 2-point lead at halftime. But then a big burst of offense allowed them to outpace the Eagles and get their first victory of the tournament. And with that, we have one of our quarterfinal matchups already confirmed. The next one will come from either seeing North Texas and the Mean Green up against the Redbirds from Illinois State. And in a big upset, we have the Redbirds getting the victory here. It was close in the first half, a few lead changes, and North Texas was up by about 3 at halftime. But a big surge by Illinois State and blew them out of the water, a double-digit victory to move on to the next round. And so we have the big upset of the number 12 Illinois State moving on to the next round. They will await their next opponent, which will be either the Hornets of Delaware State or the Ohio State Buckeyes. And we do have the Buckeyes moving on, although it was very close for much of the game. We see many lead changes to start off with, and about halftime, Ohio State was up by 6. But as the second half continued, Delaware State wasn't going anywhere, got within 1, but could not actually regain the lead, and Ohio State, with one last surge, got the victory in the end. So it is the Buckeyes that move on to the regional quarterfinals. As we go to the bottom of the bracket, we have the Gonzaga Bulldogs up against the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. And we do see the Bulldogs getting the victory here. Southern Miss did a good job of keeping it close, even within 2 points at halftime. But Gonzaga kept pushing offensively and was able to get the 17-point victory in the end. So as you can see, Gonzaga has moved forward. They are awaiting their next opponent, which is going to be between the High Point Panthers or the Paladins from Furman. And we do have High Point coming away with the victory here. Early on, Furman had the lead, but High Point got the lead in the first half, was up by 8 or so by halftime, and then continued all the way to a comfortable victory to get their first win of the tournament. Moving on to the bottom of the bracket, we see Maryland and the Terrapins going up against the Lumberjacks from Stephen F. Austin. And this was another close one, but it is the Terrapins that get the victory here. Stephen F. Austin were actually leading at halftime with about a 7-point lead, but Maryland, especially with the last surge towards the end of the second half, got the lead and were able to hold on to it to get their victory. And as you can see, we have the last matchup at the very bottom, where we have the Iona Gales up against the Drake Bulldogs. And we do have the Drake Bulldogs getting the victory here. It was close in the first half, Drake only having a marginal lead, maybe only about 1 or 2 at halftime, but then they were able to push well in the second half and get a comfortable victory in the end. And so here is a quick look of the regional quarterfinals in the California region. We will continue to figure out who our semifinalists are, starting with the Baylor Bears up against the Razorbacks of Arkansas. And it is the Bears that get the victory here, although it was a fairly close game. You had Baylor only up by maybe 3 to 5 points at halftime. Arkansas did get the lead in the second half, but Baylor were able to push forward and get a comfortable victory in the end to move on to the regional semifinals. And Baylor is sitting in a semifinal position awaiting their next opponent, which will be either the Illinois State Redbirds or the Ohio State Buckeyes. And it is the Ohio State Buckeyes that get the victory here. However, as you can see, there was a good battle between both of them for most of the game. Even Illinois State had about a 2-point lead around halftime, but Ohio State got their lead in the second half and never looked back, building on that and getting a 9-point victory to move on to face Baylor in the semifinals. And with one semifinal set, we move to the bottom half of the bracket, where we see the Gonzaga Bulldogs up against the Panthers from High Point. And we do have Gonzaga getting the victory here. However, when you take a look at this, High Point led the match about 90% of the way there, even having a 5-point lead at halftime. But it was a last surge by Gonzaga and some tough defense that allowed Gonzaga to get the final victory in the end, and a 10-point victory at that. And so the Bulldogs from Gonzaga move on. The last quarterfinal matchup, we have the Maryland Terrapins up against the Drake Bulldogs. And we do see Drake moving on to the next round. Although, as you can see, there were many lead changes throughout the game. At halftime, Drake was only leading by 5. They relinquished that lead, and Maryland was on top for parts of the second half, but Drake had one last surge to be able to pull away with the 4-point victory. And Drake, moving forward, has got our semifinal matchup set. We have at the top Baylor and Ohio State, and then we have the Battle of the Bulldogs of Gonzaga and Drake on the bottom. Let's start off with seeing who's going to win out of the Baylor Bears and the Ohio State Buckeyes. And it is the Baylor Bears that get the victory here. They take the lead relatively early in the first half, and then don't look back as they continue to build their lead throughout the entire game, moving on to the regional finals. And with Baylor set as a regional finalist, they will have to wait on which Bulldogs they're going to face. Is it going to be from Gonzaga or is it from Drake? And it is the Drake Bulldogs that get the victory here. It looks like they had the lead throughout most of the first half, but Gonzaga did well to get it to maybe a lead of 2 at halftime, and fairly close throughout, but one big surge by Drake was enough to get them the 6-point victory and have them move on to the finals. And here we are at the finals. We are either going to see the Baylor Bears, another 1 seed, come out of the California region, or could we see the Drake Bulldogs, which would be the only 3 seed to make it out of a region. Let's see who wins between these two. And it is the Baylor Bears that are victorious here. They get a lead early on and maintain that lead throughout basically the entire matchup, having them move on outside of the region to our Sweet 16. Congratulations to the Baylor Bears. And so we see Baylor being one seed moving into the Sweet 16 here. They will have to face Texas, which will be the first interconference matchup that we see so far, as long as that holds true. But yeah, Baylor, congrats to them for moving on. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this type of stuff. I've got more to do here before we finish everything up. We will be taking on the Mid-Atlantic region moving into our next video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.